Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So today I want to talk about stock compounders. Funny that. One thing I've really been thinking about lately is doing a study on stocks that have just done an incredible job of compounding capital over decades. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot. It's something that Mohnish Pabrai has clearly been thinking about more and more recently as he kind of shifts his approach from buying, a dollar bill for 50 cents that's going to turn into a dollar bill over 2 to 3 years to thinking more about, companies that are going to do a 5 to 10x over 5 to 10 years. Growing pies is really what he's talking about. Throughout the history of Pabrai funds, he's been looking at discounted pies. He wants cheap companies. And his focus is shifting to pies that maybe they're cheap, but they need to be growing. That's a prerequisite for him as he's shifting his approach towards long-term compounders. And it's really getting my mind going about, well, how do we identify these compounders? And one company that comes to mind is Crisil. If you're familiar with Crisil, Guy Spier bought Crisil in the early 2000s. Crisil is a company similar to Moody's. It's like the Moody's of India, a credit rating agency, which is fantastic economics. So one of the things Guy Spier did is he tried to identify these great businesses in the U.S. And then looked for similar businesses in developing countries overseas. And he found Crisil. And he saw that S&P had an ownership stake in Crisil. And there were just a number of things about it that got him excited about it. The issue is Guy Spier held Crisil for like 3 or 4 years. Okay, I think he got like a 4x out of it. But if Guy Spier had simply done nothing and just held on to Crisil, and it was still in his portfolio today, it would trump it. It would be the value of Crisil would be much greater than the value of his entire portfolio right now. So that one sell decision with a great long-term compounder, costed him a ton of money. So I want to wrap my head around that better. What makes a company a great long-term compounder? How can you identify it and leave it alone? Like not sell it. Once upon a time, not that long ago actually, Pabrai owned Google, right? I think it was like 2016 or 2017 he owned Google. And in one of his lectures around that time, he said, if I ever own one of these great businesses, these long-term compounders, I'm not going to sell. And of course, he sold Google shortly after that. Pabrai has never held a company, I don't think, for longer than like maybe 6 years, maybe 7 years. I think Fiat Chrysler he owned for about 7 years, but I think that's the longest he's ever owned a company. That's not true. So there was a company he bought in 1995, an Indian company, and I think he tried to sell it in like 2000 or 2001, and the broker said the stock certificates were fake. Okay, so he put them back in his drawer. He's like, whatever. It wasn't that big a part of, it wasn't a big chunk of his investment from 1995. So a couple of years ago, he pulled that certificate out of his desk. He looked at it. He thought, these don't look fake to me. So he called a broker in India, not the original broker because they were gone, but he called a different broker and he said, can I sell these? And he said, sure. They said, sure. So he sent him off. Sure enough, they got sold, and he got wired the money. Now that company turned out to be like a 60 bagger for him by mistake. He tried to sell it many years earlier. So, if somebody like Pabrai, who I perceive as very patient, like an uncanny level of patience, can only sit on a company for 6 or 7 years, unless there's an accident. The part of the challenge of buying these long-term compounders is not selling them, not being your own worst enemy by selling something that you were never supposed to sell. Okay, the intention when you bought it was to hold it for a long time. So I want to do a study of these great companies over decades. One is Crisil. I want to take a look at Crisil because, it's still humming. It's in this book, Christopher Meyer wrote 100 Baggers, stocks that return 100 to 1 and how to find them. It's really a study about stocks that have generated a 100 bagger return, but they're not still 100 baggers. A lot of them have fallen from grace. Okay. But Crisil, it's still humming. So I'm curious if any of you have any ideas about companies that I should kind of do a deep dive on this channel that are 100 baggers. They've done incredibly well and they're still going strong. Okay. I'm not super interested in companies that, they shoot up and then, they fall, right? It's not a great business per se. It was great for a snapshot in time. Although I guess, there's no great business that's going to be great forever. Okay. Every business will see its own demise at some point. But I guess what I'm looking for is companies that are still going strong and have been long-term compounders for the last few decades. That's really what I'm interested in. Companies that are kind of outside of the limelight, not the FANG stocks, but companies that maybe not a lot of people know about. And I also want to do Berkshire Hathaway, back from, 70s, 80s, 90s. I want to look at how it generated such incredible returns. I mean, in this book, 100 Baggers, Berkshire Hathaway is far and away, the greatest, offered the greatest returns over the period that this study was done. So I just want to train my mind to think, to look, to train it what to look for in terms of these stocks that are going to be great long-term compounders. That's really what I'm all about. I want to find great companies that I can put my money in and not be moving it around every couple of years. That's a lot of work, guys. And it's also a lot of risk because, 1 out of every 3 at least ideas that you invest in is not going to go as planned. And the more of these kind of long-term home runs we can find, that was really Buffett's. That's what Charlie and Warren were trying to do. Find the home runs and then let those businesses make them rich. So that's what I've been thinking about. Let me know in the comments if there's any stocks that come to mind, particularly from foreign markets. That's really interesting to me, looking at emerging markets, India, China, those in particular, but also U.S. companies, if any come to mind. And Crisil, I'm going to dig into Crisil. So that'll be the first one I do. But if you have any ideas, I want to have a little list here of companies that I go into that have been great long-term compounders, and try to wrap my mind about around the attributes that really led to them being great long-term compounders. All right, guys, that's all I got. I will see you in the next video. Take care.